yesterday a organisational group, and I'll just find it, an organisational group looking into sexual violence or advocating on sexual violence in this country, put out a press release in which they said, there but for the grace of God go, well, all men to a large extent. And joining us to talk about that is Mike Shaw, who I think is the founder of Men Against Sexual Violence, and he joins us now. Mike, welcome to the show. First of all, mate, your group is called, is it Jazz?
No.
What's it called? What's its acronym?
It's called Massive. Massive.
Massive, that's right. What does that stand for?
Yeah. It stands for Men Against Sexual Violence, and in amongst that too is intervention, education, speak out. That's a combination of those words into,
It's sort of, I'm trying to work out the difference between you in terms of your aim objectives and, say, the White Ribbon movement.
Okay, well, specifically we're focused on the sexual violence. I think White Ribbon is more broader than that, all kinds of violence, but we're specifically addressing the issue of male violence towards women and children specifically.
Why did you feel the need to start up, because I think you're the founder of it, a new organisation?
I'm not the founder per se, but was involved in the beginning of the grassroots movement. And I think why this is needed is, we can see that predominantly it is males who are sexually offending, and so males need to be part of the solution and in addressing our own behaviours, the behaviours of our brothers and fathers and uncles and the silent majority, a lot of good men, of course, out there, but it's sometimes viewed as a female issue, and we see females kind of coming to the fore in this space, but until men begin to speak up and address these things, nothing much will change.
I'm not a rapist. There's people listening to the show who are men, and 99.9% of men in this country aren't rapists. The Jazz Brothers, they've been around forever. So in other words, I could take you back to the 1980s, the 1960s, probably even the 1880s, and always find those aberrant individuals who are criminals, who murder, rape and sexually violate others. Why would you be trying to talk to me about, and people in general, when really it's just a small sliver of male humanity who engage in these appalling acts?
I think, if we take what what we just had down there in Christchurch, one of my concerns and others is the WhatsApp that were connected to them. So it's a wider issue than just that those two blokes or those three blokes that went before the courts. There's a subculture in New Zealand where there are some men who think this kind of behaviour is acceptable, and I think we would, you and I, we would know men who perhaps their attitude towards women, their attitude towards sex needs to change, and so I see it more as like a continuum, a spectrum. Granted, many men, the vast majority aren't rapists, but there's men who are involved, say, in pornography, watching pornography. They might feel that that's an innocent, non-harming behaviour, but it's all part of a spectrum of male attitudes towards entitlement, towards sex that needs to change. I think Are you saying that if I'm watching pornography, or anybody else who's listening to this, I'm part of the problem? Yes.
Why?
To be clear on that, I think the something like 80% now of pornography has a violent edge to it, where women are degraded and abused. That's the contents become more violent, and if we're putting that in our minds on a regular basis, it must affect the way that we view women in general. And there is the aspect of it being a multi-million-dollar industry. So our clicking on it is feeding that industry.
So
And,
if you believe that,
yeah.
and are you suggesting what? That the chief censors should stop that kind of pornography between consenting adults being available in New Zealand?
No, I'm suggesting that men, we need to voluntarily choose not to.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is there good porn and bad porn in your world, or is all porn bad?
I mean, I think you might find some pornography where there is really consenting adults and people are making, like some. You might find one porn star who's having a great life, but I would say the vast majority of pornography, it's women and men who have been degraded and pressured into these situations. And no,
So-
we shouldn't be feeding that industry.
So,
No.
well, the bit that I'm trying to get the correlation is things for me have got to be correlative or causative. So, does pornography mean that there are going to be more Hooch Brothers, or Mama
Yeah.
Hooch Brothers, or the Jazz Brothers, or is it something else that drives this?
I think it's related. Yeah, I think a diet of porn will raise the likelihood of you having aberrant thoughts towards women. I think that's interesting that they were filming it. So there's who's watching that. You can. I've weaned myself off porn, Michael. I was, a few years ago, I wouldn't have been able to say that. I weaned myself, got off it. It's highly addictive, and this is the problem. It feeds a part of our human nature that's not healthy. So I do see a link between.
Well, you'd actually go down quite well with. We used to have a morals campaigner in this country called Patricia Bartlett, who was determined. I don't know if you remember. If you're old enough to remember, you're old enough to remember Patricia Bartlett.
Yeah, I am.
All right, and her argument was pretty much yours, and she was reviled in the 1970s and 1980s for her suggestion of censoring those kind of publications, or going onto the internet and making sure that they couldn't find their New Zealand purveyors. Would you actually agree that we need to turn the clock back to her time and stop this kind of thing being available in New Zealand?
If you turn the clock back to her time, we're talking like three magazines, Penthouse, Hustler.
Yeah, she was
Playboy.
talking. Yeah, she was. Yep.
Yeah, and if you were a young fella, you might find Dad's stash, or you might go down to the second-hand shop and slink around a bit, and then pluck up the courage to buy one or something like that. And so you can't compare 1970s pornography to now, when we've got 11-year-olds, on their mobile phones and that kind of stuff, accessing the most vile, hateful, despicable acts of violence, sexual violence towards women. You can't compare it, really.
It's interesting though, because I'm struggling to see the causative link.
Really?
No, seriously, I've looked before I put you on the show or asked you to come on the show. I've looked at the correlation between pornography consumption and between actual offending. And as I look at sexual offences in New Zealand that have found their way into the courts, what I am finding is that almost 50% of all those convicted for sexual and violent offences or sexual violent offences in New Zealand are Maori. And I'm going, Maori, I wouldn't have thought, are greater consumers of pornography than white people in this country, would you have thought?
I wouldn't have a clue.
Well, so why would you think, if those Department of Justice stats are out there, that the predominant offenders of sexual and violence go Maori, Pacific Island, this is per capita, and then down to European, and then Asians hardly there at all? I would suggest to you there must be other parts in play, because you would have thought pornography would be equally available to all groups, wouldn't you?
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, No, so if you think that I'm saying that, pornography is the cause of all our woes, no, not at all. What I'm saying is that's a contributing behaviour that as a culture, New Zealand culture, if we have, sometimes people say, I think one statistic is like 70% of men accessing pornography at least once a month. If that's going on and the pornography is violent and degrading, then that is going to have an effect on our attitudes towards women and sex. And for some men, it's going to be translated into behaviours, not just thoughts. So, I'm not saying that porn is the key or anything like that.
I guess the problem that I've got, Mike, though, is that you've utilised, rightly or wrongly, I'm not going to make any judgment call on that, the Mama Hooch case and the sentencing of these to promote your organisation and Massive and the cause you espouse. But I'd just like to suggest to you that the Jazz Brothers, just like the Parnell Panther, these rapists, they're just aberrant, evil human beings. And really, you can't draw a correlation. They've always existed. You find them, they do their damage. You get them, and you lock them away for a very long time. Aren't we just dealing with individual evil rather than a societal problem?
No. I think to some extent, they're the extreme end of it. But you would have as a young fella. I don't want to presume anything. But you would have, as a young fella, gone to parties with his females, with his alcohol, and
absolutely, and there you and I will agree, Mike. Absolutely, but sexual attitudes in the 1970s, 80s, even 90s are very different than now. I've got teenage children, 2 girls, 19, 17, and a 14-year-old boy. Yep. Can I tell you, they're pretty onto it in a way that, frankly, our generation wasn't, and possibly yours wasn't either. They are well aware of the risks out there. They're well aware of consent. And if anything, I would suggest to you that the social power imbalance rests with young women over young men. That's why the Hooch Brothers are, such aberrant, evil individuals, I would have thought. You don't agree?
Well, what I think is we have to keep move, like what you're saying about the kids. That's great. There's another side of that. You would have followed. We're not allowed to talk about it, apparently, the Roastbusters case.
We can talk about it as much as you like. I don't know what the problem is there.
They just got sentenced.
Well, they didn't get sentenced. That's the issue, isn't it? They essentially got away with their behaviour.
They got sentenced, but it's been media suppressed. They were sentenced.
Their names have been suppressed, but not the sentences or the results of the court process. Yeah.
But and my understanding is the judge said you're not to mention, the media's not to mention the link between that and the Roastbusters. But that was you'd agree that would have, you must agree that was disgusting.
Yes, I understand that, but again, I would suggest to that aberrant. If I took you down to the school that my children attend, which is a state secondary co-ed school, you're always going to find 1 or 2 people motivated largely by testosterone adolescent who thinks that sleeping with as many men or girls as possible is an act. But I'd suggest to you that's probably for this generation a lot less than for their fathers and their grandfathers. Yeah,
and that's great. And what I'm saying is we've got to keep moving that line, keep changing the culture. Get their message across to our young men that alcohol, sex, and drugs, they don't mix. If the girl's drunk, that's non-consent straight away.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say to you, Mike, is that I think that this generation is better informed of young people, adolescents, and young adults than any generation that precedes them on the issues that you're talking about. I guess the issue that I have is, so why are the sexual offending statistics in New Zealand, people who are violently sexually offending, rape, forcibly detaining people, spiking drinks, stupefying individuals for their sexual gratification, male or female. Why are those statistics still so stubborn? Are there other factors there, given that I would suggest to you this generation doesn't think that men who sleep with lots of young girls are studs anymore? What do you think?
I think the issue of people's brokenness from previous sexual abuse comes into it. That generational thing that gets around people's minds, like if that's been a norm growing up, and we got to address that kind of issue, the brokenness in people's lives.
So you're suggesting that there's family and whanau dysfunction, that plays a greater perhaps role than pornography and the kind of violent sexual offending that we're finding in our statistics at the moment, yeah?
I think, hurt people. If you're messed up, if you're screwed up,
that's a good point.
There's a greater chance that you're gonna screw up people's life yourself. But so we need to get there's a group called Male Survivors Aotearoa, which is reaching out to male victims of sexual violence, which is not talked about as.
No, it isn't. It's appalling. It's a gross sexism. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's good to see that that's coming so that men can get some help for their dysfunctions, their brokenness, and get not that every male sex abuse victim is going to become an abuser, but there's that's a common thread that comes through quite often. I think that's part of it. But if we can come back to the porn thing, it's gotta if we've got young men. I understand what you're saying about this. In the general, there's a lot more. That has changed and not a stud. They're of screwing around, all that kind of stuff. But I do see, particularly our young men, if they're getting fed a diet of pornography, of violent pornography from a very young age, it's got to have an imprinting on their brain that's going to have a negative outcome for them. We're hearing stuff about young fellas, who've grown up on porn. They can't function sexually in their marriage, that kind of stuff, because their brain is go.
No, I understand that, and don't get me wrong, and there's plenty of scientific and empirical research to support you on that. Yeah. But I do look at things like Tinder, for example, which is basically an app designed to hook up consenting males and females for pretty much one-night stands, basically, for sexual recreation, and a whole series of sort of, subgroups within that. It seems to me that it takes two to tango, those sorts of sentences, yeah? So women are much more sexualized as well, do you think, these days, particularly of a younger generation?
Yes, they are, and the consenting adult sex, no problem with that. This is not a moral campaign per se. This is about shifting the line when it comes to violence and degradation of women in particular, and children, and changing male attitudes. If we could all improve. In our attitudes, be more vocal, be more non-accepting of this behaviour, be more...
Mike, I guess the problem I've got is that I keep on, and this is my great criticism of the White Ribbon movement as well, is that particularly when it comes to violence against children, women are just as equally likely to offend. In fact, statistically they do, as men. That's the first thing. But the second thing I've got a problem with sexual violence is I would suggest that we need to target those who are actually carrying out the offending, and that the vast majority of young men in this country, Maori, Pacific Island, Pākehā Asian, have got no intention of raping, sexually violating, spiking the drinks of, or taking advantage of young women, perhaps even in the way that their fathers and grandfathers might have done in yore. How do we reach those people who are in front of the courts and change their behaviour? Because they are the problem, aren't they?
They are the problem. But but part of it, I mean, there must have been people in the Mama Hooch bar that knew that something was going on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely there were.
And
there were another 3 or 4 individuals attached to that. Yes, there were.
Yeah, but they
were also evil bastards, weren't they? I mean, if you know that young women are getting drugged and raped and you do nothing about it, you're not exactly a normal individual, are you?
No. But if we're at a party, we see a girl that's had too much drinks, and we see a bloke hitting on her, and we know, because we're men, where that's gonna possibly end. That's a time to speak up, to intervene, and that might make us the unpopular guy. If it's if we're with our mates and that kind of thing. But we need to begin to pull the good guys. Need to pull the other guys back.
All right. Michael, thank you for joining us. You're based in Kaikoui, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. Yep.
How does somebody like you in Kaikoui, which is not exactly the citadel of the universe, end up being involved in an organisation like this? Have you got a particular problem in Northland, do you think?
I'll tell you how it started. Kelvin Davis, before he was in
Parliament,
in government, his first term, he initiated this Men Against Sexual Violence. Perhaps he didn't have enough to do at that time.
Probably.
But we had some high-profile cases in Kaitaia, the deputy principal of the Puria school, abusing about 40 kids and all kinds of horrific stuff. And Kelvin kicked this thing off back, it must be nearly 10 years ago, Men Against Sexual Violence. We did a few events, which was good, raised awareness. Some young people spoke out, they weren't believed, unfortunately. So, we're relaunching the campaign, but really it's not a campaign, it's a grassroots movement. And we want to spread that message right throughout Northland and New Zealand, ideally.
I have a message that I give my daughters, Mike, and I want to see if you sort of, and that is, if you associate with bad things will happen to you. Okay? So it's something that I've instilled in all my children. You go out with a bad boy, like a mongrel mob member or something like that, don't be surprised at the consequences. So in other words, choose your partners well. Bad things happen to bad people and people associated with them. And that is something, when I look at all the mongrel mob partners, black power partners, stormtrooper partners, headhunter partners, they've gravitated towards those criminal elements who I have to say generally don't have an enlightened view towards women. Why do women of that ilk place themselves in that situation willingly?
Very simply, they don't begin with a sense of self-worth and self-dignity, and they don't view themselves as better than that. That this is their lot. Your daughters are fortunate. They got a father that treats them well, cares for them, and makes them feel valuable, and is prepared to instill good principles and values into them. If you've been brought up with an abusive father, you're gonna feel like you're a piece of rubbish, and you will gravitate towards men that treat you like that because you don't believe you're worth more. So so what Massive is about is treating women better. It's we're not out there morally campaigning, but getting that message to our children, to our sons, our daughters. No, you're better than this, and you should be treated better, and you do speak up if someone's mistreating you.
All right.
Don't treat your girls like that. So what you're doing is good, Mike. Yeah.
No. I'm sort of more interested in. I can never quite work out why I would choose to go and live with the criminal elements and have relationships with them, and then when I get beaten up or I end up as a victim, which is the more likely case of sexual violence or assault in this country. You know, I'm sort of responsible in a funny way for putting myself in that situation. You know, and I've never quite understood why, but you've just explained.
Can I share something with you? Just real quickly,
go for your life. Yep.
Real personal. Like this is personal, but yeah, many years ago, from a frustration, I lashed out at one of my teenage daughters, you know, physically. Gave her an open palmer. Was the wrong thing to do, terribly wrong. And I said to her, why didn't you, you know, I was surprised she didn't go to the police, because it was, you know, it was an assault basically. And she said I deserved it. And I left it at that. I relayed this to my friend, and he said to me, Mike, you need to go and tell her that she did not deserve that, and that nobody's to lay a hand on her, no man's to touch her. If you don't do that, she'll grow up thinking that it's okay for men to hit her. And you know, broke my heart. And he was absolutely right. She didn't deserve to have my hands laid on her. And I won't go into all the background of how that happened. But to go back and say to my teenage daughter, you know, what I did was completely wrong, and no one's to ever touch you or hurt you like that, and to put it right. And I think girls who don't grow up with that affirmation, and they think it's okay, you know, they deserve a slap, which they don't.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike. Nice to talk to you. Best of luck. That is Mike Shaw, massive. There you are. Kelvin Davis, obviously the current Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Yes, he's Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, but he's not Deputy Prime Minister. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah. Anyhow.